I have been a badged volunteer in the Oklahoma Department of Corrections in the prison system since 2000, so 23 years. I have actually worked inside not all of those years. Most of those years I have been, well, all of those years I have been a part of what's called the advisory councils, which were originally formed by volunteers who thought the department was not paying enough attention to things that it needed to pay attention to. And we were knocking on the door saying, hey, we're the volunteers, we're in there working, we want you to listen, here are our problems. And then after a while, the department said, this group is valuable enough that we want them brought inside, and now the chair of that committee is the director of chaplains for the Department of Corrections. And it's still made up, mostly of volunteers. But we have a direct voice into the department through the director of chaplains. And in fact, I'm going to read to you from the operations manuals, which are huge. I actually get to help write 2 of them because I'm part of that committee and because I'm the one on that committee who actually knows how to write. But this is actually from the Ops Manual, Section 6 classification, otherwise known as OP-060107. Yeah. Effective date was July of last year, so it's just a year old, which means it will be updated within the next few months. So when you're brought into prison, you are brought in through one of the assessment and reception centers. The one in Oklahoma that does the most is called Lexington Assessment and Reception Center, or LARC, L-A-R-C. It's down in, of all places, Lexington, which is just south of Norman. And they have a medium security yard and a minimum security yard there. But what happens is you go through there, they decide where you're going to wind up in the system next, and you're sent there. Ideally, you're at the next place for the rest of your sentence, but that isn't really true. You can get moved around without notice all the time. But you come in at a certain level. There are 4 levels in the prison system. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is you are not doing well. So level 1 is not where anybody wants to be. Level 2 is where you start. From the day you're sentenced, you're counted as level 2, and every single day from the day you're sentenced is a day on your sentence. Whether you're in county jail for 2 months before they get you down to LARC or whatever, it all counts. So level 1 has no benefits. You're there, you get food, you get housing, that's it. At level 2, you get a pay level, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But at level 2, you earn 22 credits a month. Keep that in mind. At level 3, you can have level 3 or level 3 enhanced, and level 4 and level 4 enhanced. And we'll get to that too. Oh, come on, there we go. Your pay grade at level 1 is 0. You get 0 credits. You can get changed maybe after 30 days. Once you're moved to a level, you're there for 30 days before you can move. Level 2, you get 22 credits a month unless the statute under which you were convicted says you can't. You get paid $7.23 a month. A month. Out of this, you are allowed to buy things at the canteen, like a candy bar or a bag of chips. When you run out of the 1 bottle, they give you a 16-ounce bottle every month of a general cleaner, which is your shampoo, your body wash, your laundry detergent. Because you aren't supposed to do most of your own laundry. Some of it you get to do, and that's what you're supposed to use. So essentially, it's baby shampoo. And you get 1 16-ounce bottle a month, and when you run out of that, you have to buy more at the canteen. The prices at the canteen are basically 7-Eleven prices. They're not Walmart prices. So you're not paying 78 cents for a candy bar, you're paying $1.50 out of $7.23 a month. Level 3. Level 3, you can get 33 credits per month or 45 if you're qualified for enhanced. And you get paid $10.84 a month. Yay, pay raise. Level 4 is 44 credits a month or 60 if you're enhanced, and $14.45 a month. Now you're really rolling. Now, you're allowed to work, and there are jobs, and the jobs pay as well. Most of the jobs pay at something a little bit more than, 25, 30 cents an hour, something in that range. pay for a special project is not allowed to exceed 54 cents an hour. And the maximum for really, really high-end jobs, like if you're qualified to be a law clerk or a research assistant or a mechanic or something, you can get $27.09 a month. Not quite $1 a day. Not quite $1 a day. Some of this is going to go on a debit card, and it all works, the electronic way. In some places, they don't have debit cards yet, some of the smaller facilities. So you get cash. You're not allowed to have more than $75 cash. If you have more than $75 cash, they take it away from you. They'll hold it for you. But you can't have more than $75 cash because it starts fights. It's a security issue. When you have those extra credits, when you're sentenced for something, you're sentenced for a number of, we think of it in terms of years, but you're sentenced actually for a number of months, like 63 months, which is basically a little over 5 years. When you come in at level 1, when you come in at level 2, you're getting an extra 22 credits a month, and those credits are days. So you get sentenced, and the month of July is 31 days off your sentence, and if you're at level 2, plus another 22 days. This is how people can serve their full sentence, but still get out in less than the number of years we think they should get out. This is one of the ways they set it up to fight overcrowding in the system. When I started going in 23 years ago, I went down, I served at Lark with a group of people down there. They called and asked for a special sort of pastor, and we'll get into what kind of special I am, because I am the only one in the system. And the thing at Lark is that it was minimum security, and these guys were on their way out. They were almost done. But when I went in, the big room that I went into was kind of like this room, and there were like cells along that wall and cells along that wall, and right in the middle was the big kind of bunker that was the place where the correctional officers watched their security cameras. And all this open space was supposed to be for tables and recreation stuff. But it was in fact filled with bunk beds because they were overcrowded, and I was literally walking into people's bedrooms. Well, they've gotten a little bit better. But one of the ways they were cutting down on the overcrowding while still having people serve their full sentence was these credits for behavior. The good behavior credits give you extra days off your sentence. Some of that actually moves to your parole so that you get out after a certain number of months, and then you finish the sentence outside on parole. It's handled differently because different statutes, when you're convicted under some statutes, you're not allowed to get out until you serve 85% of your sentence inside the walls. And the statute says so. That means those extra credits don't do you any good. Which means that if you have that kind of sentence, what exactly is the incentive for good behavior? Think about that. So I went in as at the request of a bunch of guys down at Lexington. They were looking for a pagan priestess to come and celebrate the special Sabbaths of the pagan year with them. And I was part of a pagan group at the Unitarian Church in Norman. And one of the correctional officers, the COs, they're not called guards, they're COs. Except sometimes we call them guards. So, you know how systems are. We have a name for it, but we don't use the name. So one of them had a friend who was a member of this pagan group, and so the guard, the CO, came to one of the pagan rituals, participated, observed, was very respectful. I didn't know he was a prison guard. And he came up to me afterwards and said, "We've got this group of guys who've been looking for somebody for 2 years to come down and work with them. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Can I give your number to the chaplain?" And a week later, the chaplain called me and we set it up. Well, the first time in, I was supposed to bring a male escort because the chaplain said, "You cannot come into a men's prison. You're a woman. I mean, for crying out loud, we can't do that." This gets to be very funny later. So my ex-husband, who was at the time my husband, that's how that works, right? He's a lovely guy, and he's very thoughtful and compassionate, and he was part of the pagan group too, but he was terrified. He's 6'2", and he weighs like 160 pounds soaking wet, and and he was convinced that we would be gang raped in the parking lot. I mean, but he went through the process of getting his ID set up and everything, and he came in with me and we did the ritual together and everything. But what happened is, because Lexington is a minimum security place, and some of the people who were there are on their way out, they've only got 6 months, 8 months, 10 months on their sentence. And so they're not going to walk off. But it has no fences around it. You can literally walk away. Of course, if you walk away and you get caught, you get put back into minimum, into medium, or maximum. You don't get put back into minimum again. And there are reasons you don't want to get put back in maximum or medium. So these 6 guys meet us in the parking lot. They surround us. Stephen is shaking like a leaf. We go inside to the little cage where the corrections officers are, and we sign in and give them our IDs, and then we get herded by these 6 guys outdoors to the special place they've been allowed to set aside for their worship. Now, pagan and neo-pagan and Wiccan and that sort of worship structures are earth-centered. They're basically a whole spiritual tradition or family of traditions that approaches Creator through creation. And that's part of what my practice was at the time. So I am the only badged pagan, Wiccan, whatever in the system right now. And so they had this little space outside where they could do their rituals. And what it basically consists of is praying to the deities and divinities of creation and thanking them for creation and doing all the same things we do. It's just a different set of language forms. And so we went through the ritual, and they thank us very much, and then we all shake hands and we leave. Shaking hands is the only form of physical contact allowed. You're not allowed to hug anybody. Even your relatives, even your spouse. If you're visiting your spouse in prison, you're not allowed to hug them. People get in trouble for that. Okay, so we leave. Stephen is shaking all the way home. And he says, please don't ever make me do that again. It's like, no problem. Because one of the things I realized is that I didn't need a male escort because I had an honor guard. Those guys had never met me before. They didn't know me from anybody. I was coming from outside to serve a need for them, and they would have died for me. They surrounded us and walked us past the bedrooms and showers and people wandering around in towels, and they gave the stink eye to everybody who looked at us. They would have died for me. I didn't need an escort. I had one. That was something the chaplains learned. Nah, this is not the important stuff. The stuff I did with the guys down there, I worked down there for about 8 months. These were all guys who were processing out. One of the guys there was a young fellow who's about 25, 26 years old. They called him Youngster. After I went down once a month, and they came out and said to me at one point, we don't want Youngster coming anymore. And I said, well, you can't do that. You're not allowed to tell somebody they can't come to a worship service. And they said, well, yeah, but he steals from everybody. I mean, he's in here for stealing. He steals from other inmates. We can't get him to stop. Well, so my first thought is, this kid needs help. And I said, have you talked to the chaplain about this? And they said, well, everybody's reporting him for stealing. And I said, have you talked to Chaplain Chip about this? No, go talk to the chaplain. So they do. And I said, you can't keep him away. And I said, you can tell him, I said, he's not allowed to be kept away. So he kept coming. Well, about the week before I wound up leaving because there was only one guy left, and he was dealing with Alzheimer's and couldn't remember from one week to the next what was going on. If he wasn't brought to the service, he didn't come. So there came a time when there was nobody there to work with me. So I stopped coming. But about a week before that, or about a month before that, Youngster wasn't there. And I said, where's Youngster? And they said, well, he got moved. He finally got in so much trouble stealing, they moved him off to a medium yard. Okay, that's what happens. So this is about the end of 2000, spring of 2001, I'm at the medieval fair in Norman, and I see a couple of these guys from Lexington. They have gotten out. They're there with their wives and families. Yay, Chaplain Anna, let's talk to Chaplain Anna. So we talked a bit. I wasn't really supposed to talk to them for 6 months after they get out. I'm supposed to have no contact with anybody I've met inside for 6 months afterwards. And here's the thing, if you don't stay in contact right away, they usually aren't where you can find them again. So, but that's the rule. Well, I run into these guys and we're talking, and one of them says, I'm going to talk to you. He takes me aside, which makes me a little nervous, and he says, I want to tell you what happened to Youngster. Youngster got moved, and he said about a month ago, he'd gotten out shortly after I stopped going, and about a month ago he'd found out Youngster died and there was a funeral, and he went to the funeral. And he said the story the family was told is that Youngster had been working on a roof and fell off the roof. He said to me, they don't let inmates work on the roof. Why would they put him on the roof? He was there under difficult circumstances. He wouldn't have been on a roof. He said, so I went, and it was an open casket funeral, and he said, I want you to know he was beaten to death. He stole from the wrong person or people. And so his sentence for theft was a life sentence. And that happens. That's the kind of society it is. It's not like our society. They can't live by the same values we live by. They don't have the same resources and circumstances we have. And so it's a completely different structure of society, and when somebody winds up in prison, they have to spend the first several months learning who you have to look in the eye and who you can never look in the eye, and learning who you can ask for help and who you can help and who you can't. So it's like visiting a foreign country. You have to learn a whole new language and a whole new way of being. Well, shortly after this, I get called out to Mabel Bassett. I spent 5 years working at Mabel Bassett, again, with pagans and Unitarians. I got called out to Mabel Bassett because one of the women out there, Mabel Bassett is out in McLeod now. It used to be up in Oklahoma City. They moved it out to McLeod because they built a facility with 1,100 beds, 1,100 women. It's the largest women's prison in the state. Eddie Warrior outside of Tulsa, I think, has 600 or 700 beds. And there used to be a community prison here that was smaller, but they moved everybody out to Mabel. I went out to Mabel Bassett because one of the women out there said, we are tired of being told that being gay is sinful. And she went to the library. Having gone to college, she was thinking this way. She went to the library and looked up religions that are not against homosexuality. And she found Unitarian Universalism. And they called the Unitarian Church and said, we want a Unitarian visitor. We're all Unitarians now. We're Unitarian lesbians. And okay. The Unitarian Church in Oklahoma City was like, we know a lady in Norman. And they called me. And so I went, okay. I go out and meet. I'm interviewed by 30 women. I'm interviewed. I go in to do a service. The chaplain says, just do your ordinary service. And I'm like, I have no musical instruments. I have no hymnals. I have no resources. Sure. So I go in and I preach my usual opening sermon, which is the love sermon. And then I say, let's talk. What are your questions? Well, what do you say about homosexuality? So we have this conversation, which is, I don't care. Your sex life is none of my business. What goes on between you and God is what goes on between you and God, and what goes on between you and your partner is what goes on between you and your partner, and it's none of my business. Are you here to save our souls? No, absolutely not. That is God's job. I am here to offer resources and a companion on part of your journey, but I am not here to save your souls. Okay, so far so good. Then they want to know, are you lesbian? And I'm dressed in khakis and a nice shirt, and I say, you tell me. And they look at me, and they huddle up, and they look at me, and they huddle up, and they look at me, and they huddle up, and then the leader obviously stands up and says, we think you're gay. And I said, well, no, actually I'm not. I'm straight with fantasies. At which point they all go, what does that mean? And so I explained to them, we live in a culture that has sexualized women's bodies for so long that everybody is capable of seeing women sexually. Even other women. Even if you're not interested in actually having sex with another woman, you will see women's bodies as sexual things, because we've been trained to do that from childhood. Even 10 years ago, ads for men's deodorant were about sexy women. More and more now they're about hunky men, which I kind of like better. But then I'm not gay. So this conversation then ended with, well, if you're not here to save our souls, and why are you here? What is your job? Why are you coming in? Why would you take the time? What are you wasting your time with us for? This is where the voice of the least of these comes in. because they have identified themselves as the least. Now, what this word means in Hebrew is the people at the bottom of the power structure. Doesn't mean least in the sense of smallest or in the sense of less valuable the way we see things. It means the people with the least amount of power. They have identified themselves this way, and they say, why are you bothering with us? I am not a person who believes in altruism. I am a very pragmatic person. I'm also a mystic, and I think you really can't live as a mystic without some pragmatism, but there you go. So I say to them, we know from research, and this has been repeated, that people who have a spiritual practice in prison and an outside spiritual leader of some kind of outside spiritual connection, are 30 to 35% less likely to reoffend when they are released. They are 1/3 less likely to reoffend. That's a big deal. And I say to them, most of y'all are getting out at some point in your life. 85 to 90% of all the people in prison in this country will be released at some point. That means they're going to be out here in the world with all of us who think we're better than them, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. And they're going to be here with our kids and our grandkids and our friends and our relatives. And I say to them, I want you less likely to reoffend. I want this world to be safer for my kid. That's why I'm here. And they all go, well, we can get behind that. And I said, and I want it to be safer for your kids and your kids' kids. And that's when I had them. That's when they decided, yeah, we'll hire you. You can be our pastor. So I went into Mabel Bassett 3 times a month. It was supposed to be twice a month for the Unitarians, and then the pagans discovered me, and it was once a month for the pagans. I went in the first and third weekends for whatever, and the second weekend for whatever. And since the pagan Sabbaths either fall on the 1st of the month or the 21st of the month, they wound up being whichever they needed to be. Sometimes the third weekend was the pagan weekend, and sometimes it was a Unitarian weekend. The second week was always kind of you. I had a congregation of women who came to all of them because they didn't care. I had one young woman in there who the Unitarian Church in Lawton helped put her through school. She was trying to get out. She was sentenced to 8 years. She was trying to get out as early as she could. When she went in, she had 2 little kids who I think, if I recall correctly, were like 4 and 6. And her aunt told her, if you don't sign over your parental rights to us, the state will take them. And so she believed her aunt and signed over her parental rights to her aunt. Her aunt and uncle took the children, told them their mother had died, and cut off all contact. She wanted to get out and go find her kids. She wasn't sure what she would do or how she would do it, and she wasn't sure because she now had no rights to them. She had no legal rights to them at all. She had signed those away. I'm sure the family thought they were doing the best for the kids, but she had to cope with all of that while getting through prison, trying to get a degree, trying to get to a place where she could get out of jail and get a job, and be in a place where she could reach out and find her kids again. So that was one of the things I was dealing with. I came in once with a candle. I was very grateful to an Episcopal missionary named George Day, who was just an amazing human being. He helped to train me in some ways, who insisted that candles, real candles, were necessary, that there is something about a real flame that is important spiritually. And so the ops for religious materials include real candles. And it took me a while to convince them you need to also include matches or a candle lighter or a cigarette lighter or something, that the real candle doesn't work without something to light it with. I had a deal with with Mabel Bassett. I could bring in 2 matches in a box. And so I would bring in the candles, I would bring in an extra candle and light the extra candle first and use it to light the others. But that way I had at least one match to fail if I needed. But I brought in a candle for a ritual once that I had bought at Ross. It was cheap. It was lavender and chamomile, and it was going to be a ritual of healing and calming. And I passed it around among the women and said, just hold it and think about the things that you would like this candle to represent for you, and we'll all put our energy and thoughts into it before we light it. And every single one of them held it and smelled it and breathed on it, and I thought this was really cool. And the last lady to put it down was an older lady whose daughter was also in prison there. And she put it down and she said, "I haven't touched a candle in 6 years. Thank you." I brought in a picture once of the Hubble Deep Field photograph. If you don't know it, I recommend you look it up. It was taken in 1997 by the Hubble telescope of a tiny spot in our sky that is the size of a pencil dot. And there's no stars there. It's a big dark spot. And they were thinking, we'll get a picture of dark matter. And they shot the Hubble's narrow focus as far as they could, and they got back a picture with 1,500 bright, shiny things in it. 5 of them are stars. The others are galaxies. A tiny spot has that many galaxies in it. 6 years later, they did it in the southern hemisphere, and they were able to make the focus even deeper, the Hubble Ultra Deep Field photograph. They got 3,500 galaxies. I call the Hubble Deep Field photograph a snapshot of infinity taken with a disposable camera. And I brought it in, I had to take it out of the frame, can't take in the frame, of course, brought it into them to show them this view of the universe as how amazingly large it is and how amazingly beautiful it is. That photograph still has fingerprints on it because they couldn't keep from touching it. And they didn't care about what I was talking about, and I stopped talking after a while and just let them look at the picture. And I said, "Tell me what is it about this picture?" And they said, "Well, we never get to see stars." When they go out at night, if it's dark, in the winter, they go between buildings and it's dark, there's great big floodlights everywhere. They can't see the sky. If they're lucky and they're near a window and it's a full moon, sometimes they can see the full moon. They can't see stars. Ever. I don't know what good we do taking away people's view of the heavens. I don't know why we do that. I could go on talking about this forever. But my primary goal going into helping people get ready to get out has had to shift, because where I'm working now, we got a chaplain at Mabel Bassett who didn't like me, actually didn't like paganism and didn't like the fact that I had some popularity with the women that he didn't. But he got rid of me. And I worked with the committee for a while. And then recently I've been going back in at Oklahoma State Reformatory, which is in Granite, which is as far west, let's see, real far, it's that away, west. And it's out by Altus and Lawton and down in that corner of the state. So it's a 2.5-hour drive, and I go out there and I spend a couple hours about every 6 weeks, and I come back, and this is a maximum security prison. It was built in 1911, 2 years after OSP, which is Oklahoma State Penitentiary over in McAllister. Big Mac is where the death chamber is. It's where the executions are done. OSR, I believe, does not have an execution chamber. But those are lifers. Those guys are not getting out. And so I don't know what I'm helping prepare them for, except to live with each other. I have agoraphobia, and my particular anxiety disorder is about going through doorways. Every time I go into a prison, it's terrifying. I go through anywhere from 6 to a dozen doors between the parking lot and wherever I'm meeting with my people. And every one of them is a door that locks me in, that shuts and is intended to be a scary door. And then I come out, and every time I come out, I'm sad, because I have to leave these people behind. There are good reasons for some of them to be there. There are really stupid reasons for some of them to be there. We spend minimum security, I think right now it's about $19,000 a year per person. Maximum, it's closer to 30. And that's our tax dollars at work. Executions cost even more. You don't want to know what an execution costs. It's insane. We do this out of an obscure sense of safety. The mission of the department used to be about protect the public, protect the staff, protect the offender. So it was protect everybody, then protect the people who work here, and then last, protect the people who are incarcerated. The chair recently the new director has changed the mission statement, and I hope I'm remembering it correctly, but it's building a healthier community. He's focused on health, and I think that's a much, much better way to focus. But it's still really hard. Services that are available to inmates, education, that kind of thing, are almost all done by volunteers or by donations. We don't pay for very much in the way of what these people get. Our tax dollars are paying for their food, for their clothing, for their incarceration, for their beds, for the prison guards who don't get very much. So I'm going to finish up by telling you, back with the women at Mabel Bassett, one of the things I worked on for years was getting them to pray for the COs and the wardens. And the first time I said this to them, they were like, are you kidding me? We're not praying for those guys. And I said, well, here's the reason I want you to pray for them. Because if you can hold them in some kind of grace when you pray, remember that they don't get a whole lot of money. They're underpaid. They're overstressed because they're taught from the beginning to be afraid of you. Remember, the mission in those days was protect, protect, protect. So this is a fear-based system. They're scared of you. They have been told that you are dangerous people, and they are afraid of you. Even you women. Sometimes especially you women. And so they're under a lot of stress. If you can pray for them to have a calmer, better life, maybe they will treat you better. If you can treat them as people under stress rather than as an enemy, maybe you can have a better interaction and they will treat you better. Again, I don't believe in altruism. I'm not telling you to do this to be good, to be virtuous, so God will like you. I'm telling you to do this because you'll get something out of it. They kind of sort of bought into that, and it became a part of our regular ritual that we would say, we would like to pray that all the people who work here have a better, healthier life. One of the women at Mabel when I started there was named Pyro because she had an explosive temper. She spent 30 days in the SHU, segregated housing unit, solitary confinement, about every 3 months, which means she was never off of level 1. She kept coming back to level 1, and she'd be just mad. She was a big, huge woman, and she was a big black woman, but she was just this big, powerful energy all the time, and she was angry, really angry. She was angry at her family who didn't like the fact that she was lesbian. She was angry at the system for treating her the way. She was angry about everything. And she would come to my service and sit there and be angry and leave less angry. This was a conversation she and I had regularly. I don't know if I can pray for those guys. I don't know if I can pray. I don't know if, I said, well, how about you just try looking at them and thinking, that poor white boy over there is scared to death of me. And she said, well, I guess I could do that. And so, we began to work on it. When I left Mabel, she had been at level 4 for a year. She was considered a leader in the community, and everybody respected her, including the COs. And she said this to me, because when I told them I was not going to be able to come back, she said, I want you to know that this is you. You did this. I said, no. I gave you resources and a companion for part of the journey. You did the work. This is you. One of the other women there said to me, I would come to your services if you were preaching Satanism, because you gave me a 2-hour vacation from prison every time you came here. And I think that's what I'm doing at OSR. I have had lots of compliments about my preaching. I will never have one that measures up to that. I absolutely hate doing this work. And I cannot not do it. This is not a sermon. The sermon was Matthew. You know the Matthew text. Thank you all, because this church is the first church that's ever paid me to go inside. When I go inside, the time I spend in prison is part of my work time here. When I take communion elements in, I don't have to pay for them anymore. I've done that for 20-some years. But since last fall, it comes out of this church's budget. This is the first time I've had support, institutional support, for what I do. Thank you.